Hello, all. Welcome to our April SERC Talk, which is the second talk in our three-part Applying DevOps to Complex Multi-Organizational Systems series. For those joining us for the first time, I'm Mimi Marcus, the SERC Talks webinar coordinator. I hope you find the discussion beneficial, and we encourage your active participation. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Barry Bain, who's not only our SERC Chief Scientist and Principal Investigator of the Trade Space and Affordability multi-year research task, but also the SERC Talks Editor-in-Chief, who will be leading our discussion at the end of today's presentation, as well as introducing our esteemed speaker and the talk. So over to you, Barry.
Okay, thanks. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. As Mimi said, this is the second of three talks that are drawing on a workshop that the SERC had in November in response to a study that the Defense Science Board made that said that the defense acquisition methods are basically too slow to keep up with the competition, and that what the Defense Department needs to do is to get closer to what Amazon.com can do when they come out with a new release of Amazon every 11 seconds. If you're doing a primarily waterfall approach to developing your system, there's no way you can do this. And so most people are going to various forms of Agile. And so the three speakers that we have in this series are speakers that participated in this workshop that we had. So in February, we had David Seaver, who has been actually doing this DevOps thing at the National Security Agency, and gave an unclassified version of what they do. Sue Mobasser is the lead person at the Aerospace Corporation in getting them prepared to do DevOps kinds of things. She also did something called an Agile Fit Check approach that they've been applying at Aerospace for all of their activities. So we will pass it on to Sue to give you another approach that she's had on identifying for people that are preparing to do a new project. Here are some things that you might do wrong, and so Sue, over to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bam. Thank you, Mimi. As you can see that in this series of the talk, Agile adoption is becoming very popular in the government sector. Different organizations have adopted Agile differently, some good, some not so good. So today we will talk about the not so good part of it, and then hopefully we can get some lessons learned to apply to our programs. So at the Aerospace Corporation, we have something called community of interest, where people who are interested in common topics come and share ideas and exchange information and learn new things. So this presentation is also a result of a panel discussion on the topic of the Agile Anti-Patterns from our Agile community of interest. So this is not a complete research study or not a position paper, but so it will not cover every aspect of the Agile Anti-Patterns, but hopefully it will give you some useful tidbits. So first of all, I just would like to thank my team and the reviewers for their contributions to this presentation. So for today's outline, we will start with what is the pattern, what is anti-patterns, examples of the common anti-patterns that we have seen in our daily lives, and then we will talk specifically about the Agile anti-patterns on the topic of new projects, backlog management, architecture and design, testing, the team themselves, and the project management. So before we talk about anti-pattern, let's talk about pattern. So pattern is a certain form or a certain model that we use as, or a set of actions that we use to solve a certain problem. So on the other hand, if we use certain pattern incorrectly or apply to a different problem, not only that it will not solve a problem, it may create additional problems too. So as you can see, Merriam-Webster defined pattern as a form or model proposed for imitation or reliable sample of traits or action. In general, so the pattern is something that we follow to solve a certain problem. On the other hand, the anti-pattern is the opposite thing. It might be a pattern, it might be a solution that might not work for, or might work for one scenario, but not the other. So to set the stage, so here is what we mean by anti-patterns. So it is a common response to a recurring problem that might be counterproductive. So in software and system engineering field, the term was first introduced from architecture and design point of view. So we have software design patterns that we use to solve certain, to provide certain solutions. And also we have software design anti-patterns to address or to that, introduce ineffective solutions for certain problems. So this slide has some example of anti-patterns that you might have seen in organizational management or project management. For example, the common one is the analysis paralysis, that it talks about, well, it is good. It is a good thing to perform analysis, but we need to know when to stop. We need to know what is the sweet spot. Otherwise, we will never be able to get out of the analysis phase. Right, so we'll keep analyzing stuff. So the second one is groupthink, right? So groupthink is a phenomenon that people in the group think alike or think on the same direction, and that's a good thing because it creates harmony and conformity. However, if everyone think about the same thing all the time, so that might discourage creativity, or the group loyalty may become more important thing rather than the best choice, right? The third one, micromanagement, you might have heard this very often. So, it talks about managers that focus on every single detail, that, he or she will work closely and hands-on with the team. However, if it is too close, so that will create negative connotation that could lead to lack of freedom in the workplace. The next example is the mushroom management. So mushroom management can be seen when the management team tries not to overload the information to the development team. So they will keep the development team in the dark. So there's no transparency, there's a bad communication flow. All decisions are made at the top and not, passed down to the development team. So it's like a mushroom that are kept in the dark room all the time. Some more on the project management, like cart before the horse. So this happened when the team does not plan well or they perform their tasks in the wrong order. So this could be the result of trying to be inventive or trying to be out of the box and, did not think about the consequence or the sequence of the development. Date march. So when you have an infeasible project, but the team still continue to go through it, either unknowingly or because you care too much on the sunk cost. So, you're walking to the point of no return. The team might throw more resources, the money, the effort to save the project. But that's turned out to be an bad solution towards the end. The 90-90 rules can be seen in a project that is overrunning that schedule. So there's a rule saying that the first 90% of the resources account for the first 90% of the development time. However, things are almost done. So the remaining 10% account for another additional 90% of the development time. So that's the 90-90 rule. So the last example I just want to mention today is Brooks Law, that, we all have heard about Brooks Law, that when you add more resources to the late project, it will even extend the project schedule because there will be high learning curve for the new person, adjustment to the new culture. The current team member, we also have to provide additional mentorship to the team. So things will get slower and later when you add a new team member. So those are common example of the anti-pattern. So coming to the Agile anti-pattern, you might have seen several of these anti-patterns that could be good solutions to traditional software development. But once you apply that to Agile, those patterns could become anti-pattern. So the first anti-patterns that I would like to introduce today is on the anti-patterns on the new Agile project. So when you start a new project and you're not sure what to do, so there is something called Agile theater that you are doing only the stage play. For example, you learn from the training that we have sprint planning, sprint retro, sprint demo. So you just do the stage play on it, but behind the scene, you did not adjust all the processes, or you did not adjust your rhythm to incorporate all the Agile mindset. For example, you might want to you perform the detailed design at every single sprint, ask the team to freeze all the requirements and the design. So those are kind of counterproductive to the flexibility benefits of the Agile. Or you still request for all zero upfront, so that creates additional rework, or that creates the reduce the flexibility in the project. Or fluid sprints. So at the beginning of the project, sometimes you don't know whether your team should do 1 week sprint or 2 week sprint or 3 week sprint. So some project might mix all of them. Like, in sprint 1, you do 1 week sprint. Sprint 3, since things are not done, you extend to 3 week sprint, and then come back to 1 week sprint. So it is very fluid, or don't have the specific time box at all. And that caused the, violate the sustainable pace for the team. So, you can't, the team is not sure whether this time it will be 1 week or this time it will be 2 week sprint. Or the expectation that you could add any user story in the sprint during the sprint, or you can remove user story out of the sprint at any time. So that kind of reduce the the plannable or expectation of the deliverable at the end of each sprint. So, for the recommendation of this, so make sure that you understand the manifesto, understand the principles, understand the consequences of the activities or the tailoring that you are going to make. Study lessons learned from other programs, or look for solutions that are available and are proven to be effective. Some more example on the Agile pattern on the new Agile project. So you might have heard something about Scrum, but so this team is doing Scrum, but you add something that is completely opposite to what you should do in Scrum. For example, you would like to have all the extensive design up front, or you have 2 week sprints, but user stories are too big to fit within a sprint. So you have a lot of carryover item from one sprint to another sprint all the time. Or you have the what we call cylinder of excellence team, the silo team, that you have experts, system engineer in one team, expert professional developers in one team, dedicated tester in another team, and at the end of the day, you don't have cross-functional, you don't have end-to-end products at the end of the sprint. Another one that we have seen quite a lot is the part-time team member that, sometimes it is unavoidable. So you put people in multiple projects at a time. So Monday, Tuesday, work on project 1, Wednesday, Thursday, work on project 2. So this is kind of going against the lean principle that, because, they would prefer the team members to work on one project at a time, because once you have context switching, there is the cost coming up with that context switching, and eventually it will reduce the productivity, right? So, so you would prefer to have full-time team members on the Agile project for better collaboration, a better sprint. The other thing that we have seen is the Agile on the fly. For example, you took the training on Monday and Tuesday, and then you start your Agile project on Wednesday. So you do not have time to think on, what kind of practices or what kind of tools that we should use. Did not have enough time to think about who should perform which role. So, at the beginning, it will be very rough. So, not having a coach or not having any experience. So, so that is not a good pattern or practice to follow. So recommendation, if you are new to the project, so make sure that you maybe adopt in a smaller scale first, and then experience in probably start with some sustainment or DR defect burn down. So that is the one common practice that that is a good recommendation. Start small or start with mature architecture so that you could burn down one defect at a time. Some more anti-pattern on the new Agile project. You're assuming that you don't do Agile, does not do planning at all, or plan as you go. But actually, Agile has a lot more planning compared to other kinds of other approaches. For example, you have program increment planning, you have release planning, you have sprint planning, and also you regroup with the daily Scrum or daily stand-up meeting to plan what are you going to work on today. So those are something that that we use as planning. Sometimes you see that, well, for the new project, you try to work out the detail as much as you can upfront, so that reduces the potential of responding to changes. Or some project that think about, well, they want to do a quarterly release but don't know what should be released upfront, what should be released at the release 1 or release 2. So some recommendation is that, well, think about prioritization, think about minimum viable product, and plan accordingly. Use something that is called product roadmap that identify the dependency between modules or features, so that you know what should be delivered first, and later on in the plan. The other thing on the new Agile project is don't know how to handle the quality. So some teams still have the silo teams, like dedicated testing team. So so the tester might not understand what's going on in each team. So you might not factor in the quality assurance, or not enough testing, or not using automated testing. So that will delay the or will hinder the speed of the team. And if the team cannot test the product before releasing at the end of the sprint, then you eventually does not have operational or working software, right? So make sure that you have tester or QA as part of the development team. The next set of topic is on the backlog management, or some people call requirements management. So I can't emphasize enough on the spending time on backlog grooming ahead of or before coming to sprint planning. So we have seen some teams that spend sprint planning time prioritizing or writing down the user stories or estimating during sprint planning. You might revisit the estimation, you might revisit the prioritization, but it would be better to schedule a separate backlog grooming session or backlog refinement session before coming to the sprint. We also have seen that at the beginning of the project, you have 4,000 user stories to start up front. So that probably you have too many items and work into detail up front. So it's good to have starting user stories, but if you have too detailed or too many items up front, highly likely that you spend unnecessary effort up front, and it will come with unnecessary rework later on. So so it is recommended that you work on the high priority item, decompose that into user story, maybe 1 to 2 or 4 sprints ahead of time. On the backlog, some user stories don't have acceptance criteria, so it is difficult for a development team to, since this is a fast-paced development, so you need to know what is the exit criteria so that the team could sprint fast, know that how can the team know that what is considered done for each user story. So it is important to have acceptance criteria. But on the other hand, some product owners are so, having high energy and put a lot of information in the acceptance criteria. That doesn't leave room for any discussion, or does not leave room for the development team to be more engaged and, put in some creativity. Another set of the backlog management is in terms of prioritization. So we have this product owner who knows all the requirements, who knows what are the priority of the requirements, but sometimes maybe the product owner is not available, so you do prioritization by someone else, by proxy, that is not the product owner. So that reduce or limit the accountability of the product owner. So, and then you have to make sure that the product owner that we have here is knowledgeable and committed to the team. So Dr. Bim has one abbreviation that lists out the the following characteristic is the good characteristics of success critical stakeholder or product owner at this in this case. The abbreviation that Dr. Bim has is called CRACK, C-R-A-C-K. So C is from collaborative, R responsible, A authoritative, C committed, and K knowledgeable. So the product owner should be available for the team, responsible for prioritization, clarify the requirements, has authority to say that it should be blue screen or green or yellow background, and be able to answer the question. So some more thing on the prioritization, that sometimes the team did not prioritize the backlog upfront, so you miss a chance to produce the MVP or minimum viable product early upfront in the sprint. Or on the other hand, opposite to the no prioritization, which is the full prioritization upfront. So you prioritize everything in the backlog, and that that cause unnecessary effort over there. And again, so since things change all the time, so you will have to rework it. So that's additional effort that you have to spend on rework on the unnecessary work that you spend upfront. So another set of the anti-patterns on the backlog management are fail to organize the backlog by feature. So one thing that we would like to see is that at the end of the sprint, you would like to see end-to-end feature, you would like to see operational software, or you would like to see working software. So you should group and prioritize the user story in a way that at the end of the sprint or the release, you have functioning software or working software that is useful, right? So composition of backlog items. So highly likely we would recommend that so the user stories are broken down from high-level backlog items such as themes or epics or portfolio. Once in a while, you will see, orphan user stories or user story that doesn't go with any epic or any theme. So if the Scrum Master or product owner see a lot of that user stories that doesn't belong to any theme or epic, it might indicate that, you're not organized or decompose the requirements really well. Another anti-pattern is on the NFR or non-functional requirements. So these are something that you have to start baking or factor in the entities upfront. So it is impossible or that to finish or take care of a certain non-functional requirements in a sprint. For example, if you want a reliability or scalability, so that cannot be achieved within 2 weeks sprint. So it has to be put into the thought from the beginning, from the get-go, and work on that, in your product backlog and also product roadmap. Build the architectural runway to support all these non-functional requirements. So the next topic is on slide 15 on the topic of architecture and design. So the first topic basically talk about Conway's law. So Conway's law is talking about any piece of software reflects the organizational structure that produced it. So if you have a silo team, the product that come out will be, silo product, only development, no testing, or something like that. And Agile, as mentioned, so we'll focus on scalable product, focus on extensible product. So you have to make sure that you have a team that has end-to-end skills, from system engineering to developers to testing to QA, so that by the end you will have operational or working software. And the architecture and design that you design recommended that it should be done in a way that it can be extensible. It is, follow the modularity, abstract the dependency so that it could be expanded or scaled later on. So second main bullet here is one observation that we have seen. So in some organization, you don't have, don't have enough resources on professional software developers. So I have seen that. So we use the operator, we use the propulsion engineer who has all the domain experts, all the domain knowledge, or use the subject matter experts to code instead, to develop all the software engineering modules, because this person already know everything about that domain. So it is a trade-off between, are you looking for a software engineer who knows that domain, or are you looking for the domain expert that can code, right? So so if you would go with the route of having domain expert, do the coding, then make sure that you have this technical, that you might want to have a team of software engineer that, come refactor the code or guide them on how would the good looking code would look like. Or maybe we have to start defining principles, defining, the high level architecture, and then spare some sprint, or what we call buffer sprint or hip sprint, to clean up the code, refactor the code so that it will be in a good shape, or, it's sustainable. The last topic is on the government-owned software architecture. So the government should really, collaborate with the contractors or the development team, on the architecture so that it could be sustainable in the future. So it could make sure that each module are interoperable, make sure that we don't have proprietary software or black box that we don't know what's going on in each part of the module, right? So those are, make sure that the government pay attention and be part of the team. Some more on the testing. So for testing, not only cover the testing, but we also talk about getting feedback from potential users, or balancing between or getting involved by the test community or DT and OT people. So DT and OT people should move to be involved upfront. Also, you have to balance between using manual testing and automated testing. So for the manual testing, it is difficult to cope with the fast-paced development. So you have to make sure that all the test cases, test plan designed in a way that it could be tested at the end of each sprint before you deliver a software. Use test-driven development as much as you can. Define the exit criteria upfront and then work until you satisfy all the exit criteria. Use behavior-driven development, especially at the integration level, so that we'll see whether it works well either at unit level or at the subsystem or the system level. And then, use automated testing as much as you can to make sure that, because you can repeat all this automated testing at any time to make sure that you have the high quality product. On the other hand, automated testing is not everything that you should use, right? So automated testing is good, but it takes longer time to develop. It costs more, and it is more difficult to maintain, because if you have any new requirements or new information coming in, so you have to make sure that you go update all those automated test scripts or automated test cases. Right, so we just have to make sure that we have a good balance between automated testing and manual testing and all other kinds of testing. The last point on this slide is make sure that we don't have this silo team that we throw the code from development team to the test team, but on the other hand, make sure that you have the tester embedded in the development team, perform tests as you go, continuous testing, use automated testing. So next chart here is the anti-patterns that we have seen in, either from research study or from commercial sector or from government sector, from the software for the team. So the first bullet we talked about, well, sometimes the teams are so busy and the product owner or the team of product owners and the product managers was trying to help by performing backlog grooming or backlog refinement privately. So, the development team has no participation, no involvement in the backlog grooming. It could go all the way that at the sprint planning, everything is assigned, everything has been picked for the development team to work on. Or even the estimation. So top-down estimation or the estimation, story point estimation that are done by management, it has a lot of negative connotation in a way that, well, the development team should know better how long it will take to finish a certain user story. So if the management team is overestimating, then it will follow the Parkinson's law, where they say work expands to fill the time available for completion. So since the manager said, it would take 2 weeks to develop this user story, then I'm going to find some tasks to make sure that it will be completed in 2 weeks. On the other hand, if the top management underestimate the story point estimation and said, well, this thing should be completed in a day, but that's too much more work than that, then the development team will eventually reduce the quality and try to stick with the committed story point estimation. So product backlog grooming or product backlog refinement should be done together with the team. So the team will understand why, we understand that, what should be developed first and next, and then they should be able to say a word in the story point estimation so that they can be accountable on the estimation that they have. The second one is in terms of filling the sprint backlog with 100% of the team capacity. So if the team has 40 hours to work on this sprint, so you should not pick the user story to fill up all the 100% of the team capacity, because otherwise the team will not have any available time to help others or to improve on the product. So you might have seen this kind of attitude on, I'm busy because I'm fully loaded, I don't have time to help you. The rule of thumb is that usually you leave a buffer of about 20% of the capacity just for collaboration, just to check in with others, or just to handle probably drive-by requests or urgent tasks that might come from the CEO, right? So, so the rule of thumb, 20% that I mentioned, depends on teams to team. So it could be 20% for your team, it could be 15% for other team, but the recommendation is don't fill in 100% for the team capacity. The third bullet is talking about, well, so you have committed certain sprint backlog items, so you're pushing the team to do extra work, maybe work overtime, work on the weekend. If it is one-time thing, then it could be an exception. But if this happens quite often, then it will violate the principle of the sustainable pace. So eventually, at the end of the day, it will reduce the productivity. So, on the recommendation, so you could carry over all those unable to finish item, and then next sprint you could adjust the team capacity or adjust the number of backlog to put in a certain sprint. The last one on this page is in terms of not having or not scheduling the time to refactor the code or work on the technical debt. So highly likely that the team will not be able to get perfect solution or good enough code all the time. So you would like to make sure that you have time to revisit that, to improve the performance, to clean up the code, or to improve the code readability. So generally, we will set aside one sprint per release or what we call HIP sprint or buffer sprint, to clean up the code, to refactor the code, or to do hardening, or give some free time for any innovative idea, or use that to plan for the next release. Slide 18 is in terms of the project management. So the first one is in terms of planning failure. So this is one of the patterns that might work well in terms of detailed planning upfront. It might work well with traditional software development, that you work on the IMS or integrated master schedule, all the full detail on what to do and when, what are all the milestones that we have, and detail until software item level. But for the Agile, since we focus on flexibility, focus on responding to changes, to work on full detail upfront, it could hurt or it could reduce the flexibility in the team. So the recommendation would be use what we call product roadmap. That could still provide the sequence of development, that could still suggest you what, and it will show what are the product dependency, or what are the similar to a Gantt chart or PERT chart that identify what are the features that should be developed first and next. And it's still, it will still provide some room for adapting to the new information that you might have. So let's see. So and then team organization failure. So for the team organization, so not only we would prefer to see multidisciplinary team, it would be good to organize the team by the feature that you plan to deliver, so that at the end of the day, this team can have complete overlook on the following feature that they will deliver, that you will have complete information in completing certain feature. And also the flatter organization, the better or the faster you could help with decision making. Otherwise, if you need to go up to all the way to change control board, that may happen once a week or twice, or twice a month. So that creates a long waiting time or lag time that could violate the Agile and also the lean principle. Okay, so slide 19. So I think we might be able to take a couple questions after this. So some more anti-pattern on the project management. So for example, you have a 2-week sprint. but you have user story that are either too large or very large for the team to develop. So when you have this kind of user story, you don't see a lot of progress, or you don't see what's going on for that user story. When you do a daily stand-up meeting, you hear something like, yesterday I worked on this user story, today I plan to work on this user story, and this will happen every day. So the team might not know, so what is the progress here? So is there any problem? Is there anything that they can help? So make sure that Scrum Master pay attention to this large user story, and then make sure that the team or each user story get the visibility on the progress, on the potential problem or potential impediments that you might have. And also on the other hand, so if this large user story has some impediment, so highly likely that they will have dependent subtasks, and all the dependent subtasks, cannot be claimed done, or you cannot deliver this task. So there will be a lot of schedule lag or delayed the schedule, that will show up at the end of each sprint. So then the last anti-patterns that we have seen is the, so for the Agile team, especially for Scrum, you have sprint planning at the beginning of the sprint. So you have sprint review that show the product progress, and then you have sprint retrospective that talk about process, potential process improvement, right? So they will discuss what went well, what and what could be improved. So this is an opportunity for the team to provide suggestion or voice their concern, right? So the team will say, well, I would like to improve on certain tasks, or the team or Scrum Master should help me on this, right? But if there is no action item, or there is no follow-up item that come out of this concern, then the team might, voice their concern 2 or 3 times, and then they will stop after that. Because the team might feel like, they already have raised their concern, but there's no follow-up, nothing will change. So, so that will, decrease the morale in the team, and then it will kind of pull the team members out of the retrospective. So the recommendation would be that we'll make sure that we have action item or some actionable, tickets, or create that action item as part of, put that in the program backlog, put that in the project backlog, and then work on it, so that the team will know that, well, they are, we listen to the development team, and then there's some progress on the recommendation that they have suggested, right? So then slide 20, which is on the conclusion. So based on the information that I provided today, so it will come to, one size fits all. So one pattern to your project might be anti-pattern to another project, or some of these, anti-patterns might be a good pattern for your project. So it depends on the setting. It depends on whether you apply all these patterns correctly or not. Or the pattern that it might work well in traditional software development approach might not work well with the Agile development approach. So there's no one size fits all solution in this case. The second bullet there is that we have to make sure the practice or patterns that you are developing. So what would be the objective and the consequences and the benefits that why you are adopting certain practice or pattern. And then look at the lessons learned from other programs, and do not take it as is, but adjust that in a way that it could fit with your program. And the last rule is that it won't be perfect at the beginning, so you just have to perform continuous improvement, and you think about what can we do better and what can be improved, and then work and by using those action items. And then lastly, so these are the references that I would suggest that there are several books and several resources that we could use to provide, that contains a lot of information in terms of the anti-patterns that we might have seen in the software system development. So back to you. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks so much, Sue. There's a ton of questions in the Q&A module, and we'll start queuing up folks so that they can answer or ask their questions directly. With that said, I know, John, you have quite a few, and just because of the time constraint, Alan, if you would like to ask your question directly, you're able to unmute yourself. That's Alan Kirschbaum.
Yes, in the case of the architecture and design patterns that you referred to, where you have a piece of space hardware that's going to not be changed over time, how do you avoid monolithic architectures?
So I think there are several ways. Well, could you expand the question a little more? So is it specifically focused on the space system? And could you expand the question a little more?
Okay. So if you're building a space system, it's a long lead system, and defining the hardware and software system for that is going to be fixed quite early. And so I'm trying to understand how the agile approaches that you're referring to can fit into your anti-pattern of avoiding monolithic hardware software systems.
Right. So,
component specifically.
Right. So, yeah, so I think there are several ways that we can do it. For example, as I mentioned on the terms of the Conway's law, that the product that is coming out of the team will reflect the team structure. So if we have the multidisciplinary team, highly likely that the product could be, rather than silo or limited or rigid structure, you could design in a way that, for example, make sure that it is modular driven, make sure that, these days we have a lot of as a service or container system containerization that helps you to make sure that the system is expandable or be more flexible to expand or to scale up later on. So that could be one solution that comes first to my mind. And having multiple sprints, multiple releases, you could help the team to release the product in multiple steps. So, you could get feedback from the stakeholders so that, you could improve the architecture or improve the design gradually. So those are two answers that comes to my mind. But I'm sure there are more techniques that we can use.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Jim Alstead, you had a question. Feel free to ask directly if you'd like. Oh, sorry. I see that you don't have your mic. Jim mentioned your slide, project management 1 of 2 mentions earned value.
Okay.
Can you say a few words about integrating earned value with Agile?
Okay. So for the earned value, so let me see, is that this one correct? So for earned value, so a typical traditional project, you will break down the requirements into system segment, CSCI and SI, and then you claim done, gradually. But for the Agile EVM, you have to break down the requirements in a different way. So you break down the requirements into, from epics to features to user stories, and then you will claim, well, there are basically three techniques to calculate Agile EVM, right? So one technique is percentage. So if you complete 50% of this user story, then you can claim 50% on that user story. The second technique is called 50-50. So if you started certain user story, you can claim 50%. And then if you finish certain user story, then you get another 50%. You can claim 100% when you finish that. Or the third technique that I would recommend for the Agile EVM, once you decompose that into epic features and user story, use the 0-100 technique, meaning that you cannot claim completion of that user story, or you could do that in a feature level or one level up. You cannot claim done until you it passed all the acceptance criteria or definition of done. So you could do EVM at the sprint level, or some programs are doing it at the release level. So, but the idea is that do not claim done until you really pass all the exit criteria, until you pass all the definition of done and acceptance criteria. So those are the kind of Agile EVM that we might have to use differently.
Thanks. Okay, and then John Clark, you had quite a few questions. You're able to unmute directly if you'd like to ask directly. John, are you there? I see that you're unmuted. Sounds pretty faint. Not sure if your mic is working. Just for now, until you're able to ask your question directly, I'll move to Jeffrey Kraft. He had to leave, but his question was, how do you integrate the specialty engineering disciplines into the Agile process? The idea is to have them involved early to ensure no costly redesign later. It seems that Agile makes specialty analysis lag behind the design.
Yeah, so in terms of specialty engineering or specialty design, so there are several ways to do it. One of the approach that I have seen that work well is, so for example, if you have like specific algorithm or need special SMEs or subject matter expert that need to work out the design or fill in that specialty upfront, they could work on that special engineering maybe one sprint ahead of the software development team, right? So you work out all the detail and then make it ready for the developers or software developer to code the solution provided by specialty engineering.
Great, and I think I hear John's mic is live. So John, if you'd like to ask your question as well.
I think I've got my microphone working. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, well, most of my questions are basic Agile questions, but I thought I'd ask them, a couple of them anyway. Can Agile be applied to systems, i.e. to hardware, firmware, and humanware, operator, maintainer training, as well as software?
Yes, you can. You might not get full benefits out of it, but so the basic principle or the basic concept of Agile, could be similar to iterative and incremental development. So for full hardware engineering, so for example, you might break it down into multiple components, and each component you could work on it iteratively and incrementally. But for testing, you could use hardware in the loop simulation to test at the end of each sprint where the actual hardware is not available. So apply, so for hardware engineering or firmware, you might not follow strictly on the Agile principles and manifesto, but apply some principle, for example, frequent interaction or iterative and incremental development.
Yes, thank you. Next question. Can an Agile sprint be viewed as a miniature waterfall, i.e. can it have technical reviews like ASR through CDR during the sprint? Secondly, can a group of sprints, i.e. a release, be viewed as a mini waterfall?
The first question, yes. The second question, no. So I think in a particular sprint, you could see somewhat mini waterfall activities. For example, in the 2-week sprint, you could see activity of revisit the architecture, revisit the requirements, development, and test, right? So by the end of, let's say, 2-week sprint, you will have those activities. So you could say that it is more like a mini waterfall, but probably not full detail of all the milestone review. Not like, you know, you need a full day for SSR or PDR. It will be in terms of incremental PDR, incremental CDR, rather than one-time PDR, CDR. So the second question is in terms of can a group of sprint be viewed as mini waterfall? You know, for example, so I think this is your question, that sprint 1 you do requirements, sprint 2 you do design, sprint 3 you do code, sprint 4 you do test. So I don't think that's a good idea because, you know, by the end of the sprint, you want some kind of operational software or operational or working product. But, you know, you can see that it will take 4 sprints to see a working product or get feedback from the customer. So the concept of Agile is that you would like to see feedback every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. But then if you extend this and then you see the feedback every 8 weeks, then you don't get the benefits of frequent feedback there.
I was thinking more of a group of sprints that was called an epic. It would be a group of use cases that are related into a release.
A group of use cases that will be in the release.
User stories, I'm sorry.
Okay. Not sure I understand your question.
Oh, a group of user stories that are related could be allocated to a group of sprints and then grouped into a release. Could they technically be applied to that release?
Yeah, so, you know, for requirements decomposition, so you have, let's say, you know, the terminologies depend on the organization. You might have epic as the big level requirement, and then feature, which is the, you know, multiple features contribute to epic, and then multiple user story contribute to feature. So, so you're asking that can an epic be viewed as a mini waterfall? So I think it's user stories are more in terms of requirement item, and waterfall is the time related activities. So I think we are comparing apples to orange in my idea.
Okay, thank you. My next question, are user stories the same as use cases in activities and functions or behaviors and in object-oriented operations? In other words, they all seem to be the same terms, you know, using verb-noun pairs to define a story or a use case or an activity or a function or a sequence diagram.
So I think they are complementing each other, but they are not the same. So for example, user story is that, you know, they're using the format of as a role, I want to perform this so that I could get the certain benefits. But for use case, you know, you have a paragraph of describing user scenario, and you also have the rainy day or sunny day scenario. So there are 2 sets of information that explain what a user wants. But user story are more concise and mainly focus on what would be the feature or what would be the function that you would like to see out of that user story. So I think they are complementing to each other, but not the same.
Oh, okay, good. What contract type is works best for Agile? Cost plus, time and material, labor hour?
All of the above. IDIQ. We have seen a lot on, we could do firm fixed price too. But, you have to make sure that you know how to prioritize your feature, so that at the end of the day, if, you are running out of budget, then you can drop the lower priority requirements. The cost plus incentive. I have seen projects with all kinds of contracts on the Agile program.
Okay, thank you. How do you define the terms architecture and design? What are the differences?
I think they are pretty much, they are going together. So architecture is, building up the structure or define the, translate all the requirements into more, let's say, model-ish form. And the design is, applying development technique or style into those models.
Just adding into your prior question, John, Scott Nigel just added in that an epic is typically longer than a release.
Right. Yeah. So that kind of depends on programs. Or if you ask 10 programs, they will define terms differently. So some program you will see that epic is shorter than release. Some program you will see epic is longer than release. So.
Right. I think, are we out of time?
Yeah.
We are running into it. So it's up to you whether you're able to continue. Otherwise, I can send over some of the questions for everyone on the slide deck. Your contact information is listed if they want to follow up. If you're willing to, we can keep going. But again, I know it's 2 minutes after our designated time.
Well,
I think, yeah, send me the questions if you want. So, and thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. As I mentioned, I'll send them over to Sue, and we'll release the answers as we get them. Thank you again so much, Sue, for your time. And Barry, I think you're still on. Just a heads up of our next talk is still continuing our Applying DevOps to Complex Multi-Organization System series. Sorry, I thought I heard Barry join us. And that's with Dr. Steve Maynor speaking on, can DevOps practices be applied to cyber-physical systems development? And that is on June 5th, same time at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, thank you so much for joining today, and hope to see you on June 5th, if not before.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sue.
Thank you. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody.